There's a jar sitting in a Roman kitchen. Inside it is a syrup so dark it's almost black, thick as molasses, and sweeter than honey. It goes into the wine. It goes into the fish sauce. It gets spread on fruit, packed with army rations, smeared on faces as makeup. Roman writers describe it constantly, the way we describe salt, and it is loaded with lead. You've probably heard where this goes. Rome poisoned itself. The emperors went mad. The aristocracy went sterile. The empire rotted from the inside out, all because they liked their wine sweet. That story has been told for 60 years. Most of it is wrong. And the reason it's wrong is far more disturbing than the myth, because the actual poison wasn't a luxury. It was the exhaust from the Roman economy itself, and it did not care whether you were an emperor or a farmer. Start with the syrup. Romans made it by taking unfermented grape juice and boiling it down. Reduce it by half and you get defrutum. Reduce it to a third and you get sapa. The terms wobble between authors, but the idea is constant. Concentrated grape sugar before anyone in Europe had cane sugar. Cato writes about it. Pliny writes about it. And Columella, in a manual on running an estate, gives an instruction that turns a cooking tip into a chemistry experiment. He says the vessels should be lead rather than bronze, because bronze throws off verdigris in the boiling and ruins the flavor. He's right about the bronze. He is catastrophically right about the lead. Grape must is acidic. Boil an acid in a lead pot for hours, and the acid attacks the metal. What comes off the walls of that pot is lead acetate, a compound that later chemists would name, with no irony whatsoever, sugar of lead, because that's what it tastes like. Sweet. Not metallic bitter the way you'd expect a heavy metal to taste. Sweet. So the Roman cook boiling sapa in a lead cauldron isn't just failing to notice contamination. The contamination is improving the product. Every hour on the fire, the syrup gets sweeter, and the reason it gets sweeter is that it's dissolving the pot. And this stuff was everywhere. Defrutum went into vinogrum, a mix with fermented fish sauce that was one of the most common condiments in the empire. It preserved fruit through winter. It rescued wine that had turned. It was issued to soldiers. Cookbooks mention it on nearly every page. In the 1980s, a geochemist named Jerome Noriagu did the obvious experiment. He followed the ancient recipes using lead vessels and measured what came out. The concentrations ran from 240 to 1,000 milligrams of lead per liter. His conclusion was that a single teaspoon of that syrup daily is enough for chronic lead poisoning. Noriagu published this in the New England Journal of Medicine in 1983 and argued it had contributed to the fall of Rome. He pointed at gout, which was rampant among the aristocracy and which lead exposure genuinely can cause. He went emperor by emperor cataloging erratic behavior, and the idea detonated. It's been in documentaries and textbooks and half the videos on this platform ever since. Then the classicists read it. John Scarborough, a pharmacologist who also read Latin, reviewed the book and called it so full of false evidence. Miscitations and flippancy toward the primary sources that a reader couldn't trust its basic arguments. Tony Waldron, who specialized in occupational medicine and archaeology, made the broader point. The decline of Rome is a phenomenon of enormous complexity, and it's simplistic to pin it on one cause. Then the bones arrived. If the Roman elite were being uniquely poisoned, their skeletons should show it. They don't, particularly. Lead burdens in Rome came out roughly comparable to a legionary camp in Bavaria. Skeletons from Roman Britain sometimes ran higher. Studies of aristocratic lifespan and fertility found nothing that needed a toxin to explain it. And then someone tested actual wine. A 1st century BCE amphora recovered from a shipwreck off Albenga still had residue in it. The lead measured about 1.5 micrograms per gram. Higher than a modern bottle, certainly, but nowhere near what you'd expect if sapa were being added at the doses the texts imply. There's one more problem with the standard story, and it's the part that always gets left out. Romans knew lead was dangerous. Vitruvius, writing on architecture, looks at the men who work the lead foundries, notes how pale and wrecked they are, and recommends clay pipes for water instead. They understood the hazard. They just never connected it to the cauldron in the kitchen, because nothing about a sweet syrup announces itself as a metal, so the elegant theory falls apart. Sapa was real, the chemistry was real, and it certainly hurt some people. It just wasn't poisoning an empire. Which is where this gets genuinely strange. In 2025, a team led by Joe McConnell published something that came at the question from an angle nobody in the old debate had. They didn't study Rome, they studied ice. Arctic ice sheets are layered archives. Every year lays down snow, and that snow traps whatever was drifting in the atmosphere. Drill a core, count the layers, date them against known volcanic eruptions, and you have a year-by-year record of what was in the sky. The team read 3 cores covering 500 BCE to 600 EE, the entire arc from the Republic to the fall. The lead is there, and it rises and falls in step with Roman economic history. It climbs when Rome takes Spain and opens up the silver mines. It drops during plagues. It peaks during the Pax Romana. Here's why. Roman silver doesn't come out of the ground as silver. It comes out bound up in lead ore, and you separate them by smelting. For every ounce of silver the empire pulled out, it produced something on the order of 10,000 ounces of lead, and vaporized a great deal of it into the air over Europe. Rome ran on silver coinage, which means that every denarius minted, every soldier paid, every province taxed, was underwritten by a furnace pumping lead into the sky. The researchers modeled how that plume spread and then converted it into what it would have meant inside a human body. Their estimate, childhood blood lead around 2.4 micrograms per deciliter across Europe, and a population-wide reduction of roughly 2 to 3 IQ points. Now hold that loosely. Going from ice core to atmospheric concentration to blood level to IQ is a chain with real uncertainty in every link, and the authors say so themselves. But sit with the shape of it, because the shape is the whole point. The old story had lead as an elite affliction, mad emperors drinking themselves stupid from silver cups. The ice tells a different story. The heaviest exposure wasn't in the dining rooms. It was downwind of the smelters, in the countryside, on people who never tasted sapa in their lives, and who owned almost nothing the silver was being minted for. The poison wasn't a decadent indulgence. It was infrastructure. Did it destroy the Roman Empire? Almost certainly not. 2 or 3 IQ points spread across a population is not what topples a state. Rome fell for reasons that fill entire libraries. Currency debasement, plague, civil war, overextension, pressure on the frontiers, 100 things tangled together. But that was always the wrong question. The interesting finding isn't that lead ended Rome. It's that 2,000 years before anyone used the word industrial, an economy was already large enough to change the chemistry of the atmosphere. And that change was already measurable in the blood of children who lived nowhere near it. The Romans weren't stupid. They knew lead was poison. They saw it in the pale, ruined bodies of the men who worked it. What they couldn't see was scale, that the danger wasn't in the pot or the pipe, but in the total, invisible, empire-wide consequence of doing something profitable 100 million times. That's the part worth taking with you. Not the sweet wine, not the mad emperors. The fact that a civilization can know exactly what a substance does to one person and still have absolutely no idea what it's doing to everyone.